I watched Marcus arrange the kindling with methodical precision, each stick placed just so, the way he organized everything else in our life. 20 years of marriage had taught me his patterns. Should catch quickly, he said, not looking at me. The flames leaped to life, casting dancing shadows across our small campsite. Pine scent drifted on the evening air, mixing with wood smoke. I pulled my jacket tighter. It's beautiful here. He nodded, poking at the fire with unnecessary focus. The lake stretched before us, mirror smooth in the dying light. We'd driven 3 hours to escape the city, to find whatever we'd lost in the noise of daily routine. I think I'll take a walk, Marcus said, standing and brushing ash from his hands. Clear my head before bed. The silence stretched between us like the dark water. I wanted to ask him to stay, to talk about the distance growing between us, but the words stuck. Don't wait up, he added, already turning toward the tree line. I listened to his footsteps fade into the woods. Alone by the fire, I noticed the neighboring campsite for the first time. A single tent pitched near the water's edge. Earlier, I'd glimpsed a tall figure setting up, but we'd only exchanged polite nods. The flames crackled, sending sparks into the star-filled sky. I wondered if coming here had been a mistake. Marcus disappeared into the darkness between the pines. I sat cross-legged on our camp chair, watching the fire settle into steady orange flames. The lake lapped gently against the shore, a rhythm that should have been soothing. Instead, I felt restless. When had we stopped talking, really talking, not just coordinating schedules and discussing mortgage payments? The retreat was supposed to help, but Marcus seemed more distant than ever. A twig snapped in the woods behind me. I turned, expecting to see Marcus returning already, but the tree line remained empty. Just night sounds, an owl calling across the water, wind through the branches. I added another log to the fire, watching sparks spiral upward. The neighboring campsite remained quiet, though I could see the faint glow of a lantern through the tent fabric. The stranger had seemed pleasant enough when we'd nodded earlier, tall with dark hair and careful eyes that lingered a moment longer than necessary. The thought made me shift uncomfortably. When had I started noticing other men again? The realization unsettled me more than it should have. Marcus had been gone 20 minutes. The woods weren't that large, just a narrow strip between our campsite and the main road. He was probably just walking the perimeter, working through whatever thoughts he couldn't share with me anymore. I poked the fire with a stick, sending up a shower of sparks. The silence felt heavier now, filled with all the conversations we weren't having. The man emerged from the shadows like something conjured by the firelight. I hadn't heard him approach, but suddenly he was there, standing at the edge of my camp circle with his hands in his pockets. Evening, he said, his voice low and careful. I pulled the wool covering closer around my shoulders, suddenly aware of how isolated we were. Hi. Mind if I sit? Fire's nice? He gestured to the empty chair Marcus had vacated. I'm Rowan. Sophie. I studied his face in the flickering light. Strong jaw, eyes that held secrets. Sure. Sit. He settled across from me, the fire crackling between us. Peaceful out here. No cell service, no distractions. That was the idea. I tucked my feet under me. My husband and I needed to get away from everything. Husband's not here? Taking a walk. The words felt strange, defensive. He'll be back soon. Rowan nodded, his gaze steady on mine. Sometimes we need space to think clearly. Something in his tone made my pulse quicken. The fire threw shadows across his features, making him seem dangerous and safe at the same time. I should have felt uncomfortable, alone with a stranger in the middle of nowhere. Instead, I felt more awake than I had in months. What brings you out here? I asked. Same as you, I think, trying to figure some things out. He leaned forward slightly. Sometimes the answer's simpler than we make it. The soft material around my shoulders felt heavier suddenly, like a weight I could choose to carry or set aside. Alone? Rowan asked, though he already knew the answer. I didn't respond with words, just smiled. The question hung in the air between us, loaded with possibility. The fire had burned down to glowing embers, casting everything in warm amber light. He reached across the space separating us. His fingers brushed my shoulder just above where the wool had slipped down. The touch was light, questioning. I could have pulled away, should have pulled away. Instead, I leaned into it. Sophie. My name sounded different in his voice, like he was tasting it. I stood, the covering falling away, and moved around the fire pit. The distance between us closed to nothing. His hand found my face, thumb tracing my cheekbone. Your husband isn't here, I whispered. The stars wheeled overhead as he kissed me. 20 years of marriage, of routine and silence and careful politeness, dissolved in that moment. His hands were strong, sure. Mine found the solid warmth of his chest. We moved toward his tent without speaking. What followed belonged to the darkness, to the space between what we were and what we chose to become. The lake witnessed our betrayal in silence, reflecting stars that cared nothing for wedding vows or consequences. Later, much later, I slipped back to my own camp. The fire had died to ash. My skin still held his scent, pine and something uniquely him. I felt changed, awakened, guilty, and strangely free, all at once. The tent was empty. Marcus still hadn't returned from his walk. I found it on my sleeping bag when I crawled into our tent. A piece of paper torn from Marcus's journal, his careful handwriting stark in my flashlight beam. I saw everything. I can't be part of this. My hands shook as I read it again. The words didn't change. Marcus had been out there in the woods, watching. He'd seen me cross the fire pit, seen me disappear into Rowan's tent, seen 20 years of marriage end under the stars. I sat back on my heels, the paper crumpling in my grip. When had he returned? How long had he stood there in the darkness, witnessing my betrayal? The thought should have devastated me, should have sent me running after him to explain, to apologize, to beg forgiveness. Instead, I felt a strange calm settling over me. I crawled outside and looked around the campsite. Marcus's hiking boots were gone from beside the tent. His jacket, his keys. The car still sat in our parking spot, but his overnight bag had vanished from the back seat. He'd left. Actually left in the middle of the night, walking away from everything we'd built together. Part of me wondered where he'd go, how he'd get home. But the larger part, the part that had kissed a stranger by firelight, felt something like relief. I smoothed the paper against my knee and read his words one more time. Then I folded it carefully and tucked it into my pocket. Evidence of the moment everything changed. The lake stretched before me, dark and endless. I wasn't alone anymore, but I wasn't the same person who'd arrived here yesterday either. I woke to birdsong and pale light filtering through the tent walls. For a moment I forgot where I was, reaching automatically for Marcus's familiar warmth. My hand found only empty sleeping bag. Then I remembered. The stranger's touch. Marcus's devastating words. The choice I'd made under the stars. I unzipped the tent and stepped into the morning air. Mist rose from the lake's surface like ghosts. The neighboring campsite was quiet, Rowan's tent still zipped shut. I wondered what he was thinking, if he felt the same strange mix of guilt and liberation that coursed through me. My phone showed 6 missed calls from Marcus. He'd found his way home somehow, probably called a cab from the main road. I deleted the notifications without listening to the voicemails. Whatever he had to say could wait. I built a small fire and made coffee, going through the motions of a normal morning. But nothing felt normal. The woman who'd arrived here yesterday wouldn't have kissed a stranger, wouldn't have felt relief at her husband's departure, wouldn't be sitting by a lake at dawn, planning her next move instead of racing home to salvage her marriage. The coffee tasted bitter, but I drank it anyway. Across the water, a loon called, its voice wild and free. I envied that sound, that complete lack of apology for existing. Rowan's tent zipper whispered open. I didn't turn around, but I heard his footsteps approaching, felt his presence like warmth at my back. Morning, he said quietly. Morning. You okay? I considered the question. Was I okay? My marriage was over? My husband was gone. I'd betrayed everything I thought I believed about loyalty and commitment. Yes, I said, surprised to realize it was true. I think I am. Rowan sat beside me close enough that our shoulders almost touched. He held a steaming mug, steam curling up between his fingers. Rough night? He asked. I showed him the crumpled paper. He read it without expression, then handed it back. I'm sorry. Are you? The question came out sharper than I intended. Because I'm not sure I am. He studied my face in the morning light. What do you mean? 20 years, I said, staring at the dying embers. 20 years of growing apart so slowly I didn't notice until we were strangers sharing a house. Maybe this was just the excuse we both needed. That's a hell of a way to end a marriage. Better than letting it die by degrees. I poked at the ashes with a stick. At least this was honest, raw, real. Rowan was quiet for a long moment. What happens now? The question hung between us like smoke. I could pack up, drive home, try to repair what Marcus and I had broken long before last night, spend the rest of my life wondering what if. Or I could choose something else entirely. I don't know, I said. What do you want to happen? His hand found mine, fingers intertwining. I want to know if last night was just rebellion or something more. I looked at our joined hands at this man who'd appeared from the darkness and changed everything. I barely knew him, but I knew how he made me feel. Alive. Awake. Like myself again. The flames flickered higher as I added kindling. There's only one way to find out. We spent the day by the water, talking in ways Marcus and I had forgotten how to do. Rowan told me about his divorce 2 years ago, the relief of escaping a marriage that had suffocated them both. I shared the slow erosion of intimacy, the way Marcus and I had become polite strangers. No kids? Rowan asked. We tried for years. After the miscarriages, we just stopped trying for anything. I wrapped my arms around my knees. What about you? None. Sarah wanted them, but I wasn't ready. By the time I was, she'd already checked out emotionally. He skipped a stone across the lake's surface. Funny how we know something's wrong, but keep pretending it's fine. The afternoon stretched golden around us. We swam in the lake's cold water, ate sandwiches from my cooler, lay on the rocky shore letting the sun dry our skin. It felt like playing hooky from my real life, except this felt more real than anything I'd done in years. As evening approached, I pulled the soft covering around my shoulders, the same one I'd worn when he first touched me. The weight of it felt different now. Not a shield, but a choice. I should go home tomorrow, I said. Deal with the aftermath. Should you? Rowan's fingers traced patterns on my arm.